Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As. I forgot to take my hat off, so let me just jump right into this. Alright, first question. If I scale down volume through either reps or sets with the weight remaining constant to prevent overtraining and injury, will potential gains be compromised from a progressive overload perspective? No, not necessarily, because here's the thing. We're talking about regulating volume to avoid overtraining. No, you're going to make more gains, because if you reach an overtrained state or you even chronically overreach, you're going to lose gains. People need to get away from this idea that more work is always better. More work is better to a point, but if more work brings you to a point to where you are forced by the recovery issue itself to back down rather than timing it yourself ahead of time, you think you're going to make better gains? Meaning, in order for the dual factor recovery models to work, you have to scale back before you reach that threshold. If you don't, you're going to end up making less progress than had you just coasted at 10% under which you could recover from. Meaning people who just do constant training, who push themselves hard, moderately hard, but never to the bleeding edge, never to the point of where they're ever required to back off, those people will make pretty consistent, decent gains. All right, in order to make better gains in those people, you use dual factor recovery, where you push beyond your body's ability to recover for an extra basically bonus and gains. But if you don't time it and back it off in enough time, it ends up causing regression. And that's the best way to look at it. You basically have two methods of dealing with your recovery. Both have their merits. Neither one of these is right or wrong. It's a matter of how you want to work with it. But pushing yourself to the absolute threshold requires a more intelligent approach to your training, because it has a larger margin for error. And if you get the margin of error wrong, you sometimes actually lose gains. You can lose muscle and lose strength. All right, so people need to understand that difference. So your choices are to basically work off of single factor recovery, which means you train to almost to where you stay within your recovery model. You don't ever push beyond what you can recover from. You keep your frequency, your workload, your volume within a level that you can recover from, and just work on gradual progression, even periodization sometimes, and you stay under that threshold. That will produce pretty consistent good gains. To get the great gains, that 10% more, that 5% more than what they're getting, you have to push above that line. But if you mess it up, you're going to end up at the end of the year behind where you would have been had you just stayed below that line. But if you time it all right, push beyond, back off, push beyond, back off, you'll end up maybe 5 or 10% better off than you would have been had you stayed below that line. And that's the way to look at it. And there's neither one of these is a right or a wrong way to train. They both have their merits. They both have their benefits. You've got to figure out what's right for you. But backing off to avoid overtraining, no, that will give you more gains. And so you got to look at it from that perspective. All right, next question. You recently made some comments on the changes to your 5x5 as your numbers come close to the goals. 2, 3, 4 plates for 5 reps on bench, squat, deadlift. Do you still consider people novices until they achieve these goals, or has that changed at all? Keep up the good work. I don't know how I would define them. I guess if they're getting close enough to those goals that they sometimes need to scale the workload back, maybe they're no longer true novices. But here's my point. Does it matter? Does it matter where we classify them as long as we have the training correct? Because what people need to understand, defining someone as a novice, intermediate, advanced, elite, all these different categories have nothing to do with bragging rights. When you take them as an ego thing, to where you have to define them based upon some sense of accomplishment, you are messing up. You're misinterpreting why these categories exist. In all honesty, I think the best thing we could do would be to change them to numbers. But the community, they're already set. People already use these terms. They already use these terms. If we just change them to a number system, class A, or class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 lifters instead of novice, intermediate, advanced, elite, it would probably take the ego side out of it. Or A, B, C, D. And people are like, well, why? Because it's not about comparing yourself to anyone. These categories exist to help you pick the right training programs to put you where you need to be in terms of progression, deloads, things like that. That's the only purpose of these categories, is to help you pick appropriate training protocols, right? That's why they exist. So if we've modified the original protocol to deal with someone's changing recovery and changing work capacity, and we've already done that by making those changes to the novice program itself, does it matter if we change their classification? We're going to use the same training protocol no matter whether we call them an intermediate, a novice, an elite, a super saiyan, a Batman, whatever term you want to give them. It doesn't matter. It's just a word. It's just a category, and that category only exists to help people pick the right training protocols. But we've already modified the training protocol. Therefore, their category becomes largely irrelevant, doesn't it? Because that's the whole point of the categories, is to adjust your training protocols. That's it. That's the only reason they exist. I said when people take them as an ego thing, that they're misinterpreting them, they're using them incorrectly, and that again creates a margin for error when you do that. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm currently on your novice 5x5 and can only lift 2 times a week due to work. I would like to perform overhead press twice a week. Is it possible to perform the lift on workout A with 10% less weight from workout B and doesn't affect me with the recovery since I'm already benching heavy on workout A? And I'm also not doing the tricep extensions. All right, normally I tell people don't modify my program. And if you do modify my program, please don't tell people you were on my program so the program doesn't get a bad name if you mess up. In this case, you're forced to change my program. All right, so you're no longer on my novice program. You're running something similar to my novice program, but you're training 50% less. That's okay. In your case, because you can only train twice a week, you really need to get all of your basic functions in to get full development. I might recommend that you go ahead and do that. If you feel like you need the extra shoulder development and you need the overhead press twice a week, because honestly, you're getting an overhead press every 4 days if you do it the right way, about every 4 days through the normal rotation. But since you're getting less training, you've got more recovery time. So if you wanted to work that in the way that you're thinking about doing, particularly since the tricep extensions and stuff have been pulled out, and if the shrugs have been pulled out, go ahead and do it. It'll be fine, no problem with it. Go ahead and do it the way that you suggested doing it. It's not a bad way to adapt the program to your lifestyle and work schedule, because sometimes we have to do that. But in this case, this is actually, I think, an intelligent modification of my program, so I will go ahead and tell you in your specific case, go ahead and do it, brother. It'll probably work out just fine. All right, next question. I feel my lower back is a weak link squatting and deadlifting. I've added in front squats, kneeling squats, good mornings, and hyperextensions into the rotation. Anything else I can do? More core work. If your lower back feels like a weak link in these lifts, I wouldn't add this many accessories. Look, if you have your lower back as a weak link on your big lifts, find one accessory exercise for your lower back, right? If you want to do hyperextensions, do some hyperextensions. If you want to do good mornings, do some good mornings. Be careful with the good mornings. Now, that being said, if your lower back is a weak link, it's also a very real possibility that your abdominals and core are a weak link. I might recommend to you that at the end of every one of your workouts, you add in some additional core work, some standing cable crunches, some standing band crunches. All right, those give tremendous carryover if they're standing to your squat and your deadlift. I might recommend that you do that instead. Wouldn't be a bad way to go. Yeah, give that a try. See if that helps. Don't go overboard on the other accessories that you think are going to hit the lower back, because it's not necessarily going to work as well as you think. Pick one. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've noticed that during your deadlift you slightly dip your hips just before driving your feet through the ground and then powering up the weight. It looks like you're using your thighs to assist. If I want greater hamstring and back development, I was recommended to straighten the legs another inch or two, drop my armpits to my waist to engage my back, take the slack out of the bar, and then power weight up. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks. Why don't you just do the deadlift the way the deadlift is intended to be? The deadlift is meant to work almost every muscle in your body. Why would you take one of those muscles out? Meaning, if you're using a little bit of quad drive and it lets you do 10 more pounds for your 5 rep sets, why wouldn't you just go ahead and train with the normal protocol that gives you the best deadlift technique? If you wanted to focus on an individual muscle more, that's what accessory exercises are for. Okay? That's why I hate that when people take a big movement like the deadlift or a big movement like the squat and say, I want to modify it in a way to bring up a weak point. Why don't you just perform these big heavy exercises in an ideal manner? And then work on the other muscles. Meaning, don't change your normal deadlift. Your normal deadlift contributes to your thigh development. Like you're worrying about taking your quads out of it, the deadlift is a quad builder. It will build your quads. If that was the only quad exercise you do, you will build quads. It won't build them quite as big as a squat will, but it'll build them. You don't need to worry about taking on a big compound movement. Don't ever worry about removing muscles. Now, if you're saying, well, I want more hamstring, don't modify the deadlift, do hamstring work. You want to know what I feel the absolute best hamstring builder is? It carries over the best to the deadlift, a glute ham raise. So if you want better hamstrings to improve your deadlift, or for better hamstring development, do a glute ham raise. And if you bring your hamstrings up, if they really are a weak link in your deadlift, even doing it the way I'm doing it, because your hamstrings get work more than your quads the way I do it. Again, try it my way heavy and you'll feel the difference. Yeah, the quads get work, but not as much as the hamstrings. If you want more hamstring work, don't take the quads out. Do more hamstring work. And if your hamstrings really are a weak link in your deadlift, if you do that hamstring work, your deadlift will go up. You'll get stronger on it because you strengthen the weak link. And so I would recommend you do some glute ham raises. Problem solved, brother. All right, next question. Hi Jason, I've been running your novice program since September of last year. I'm a late novice with 5 years of lifting experience. I seem to be having a lot of problems with stalls and most recently strength regression. For example, one workout I will peak on a 225 squat, 315 deadlift, 105 overhead press, yet for whatever reason my strength will take a nosedive the following workout and continue on a downward slope for weeks on end. Yes, I've tried several weight resets and deloads for months. I understand I need to set realistic goals and be patient with progress. But it seems that no matter how much money I spend on food or supplements or how meticulous I am with my nutrition and training practices, I just seem to get fatter and weaker. When he said this, I needed to go look at the guy. All right, brother, you got to figure out what you want. Because if you want to get stronger and you want to get bigger, you are going to have to gain weight. This idea that you're getting fatter is in your head because I've seen your photos. All right, you look like an in-shape guy who's finished half of his noob gains out. All right, so you look like you've been training hard for about 6 months in terms of muscle gains. You're lean in every single photo you have. I looked through the photos you have going back real quick. It took me about 30 seconds over about the last 2 years. I don't see a single photo where you look even remotely fat by any healthy standard. You look lean year round. So where are these points to where you're getting fat and weak? Have you considered that it's the fact that you're probably restricting your food too much for you to gain muscle? Because some of your photos you look like you, and people will say, no, he doesn't know because it's not lighting. I'm looking at the lighting the guy is in. Even just his arms and shoulders, he looks like he's cutting for a bodybuilding show. You're not eating enough food to gain. And your idea that you feel like you're getting fatter, you look athletically lean year round. There is no looking fatter for you. It's in your head. It's in your head. You need to increase your carbohydrates. You're stuck at mid-novice numbers and have been there for years. You're not gaining weight because I'm looking at your overall height. I don't know how tall you are, so I can't tell what you weigh. But you are underweight for someone whose goal is gaining muscle mass. All right, now some people would look at how you look and be very happy with that. So I'm not telling someone they need to decide for whatever reason that they need to gain. If they're happy with the size that you're at, then by all means stay there because you look fit. I mean, you can tell you're in shape. But the point is, you're fixating upon not making gains but it's your obsession with leanness and your refusal to eat enough food to gain scale weight that's causing you to be stuck at these numbers. So you have to decide for yourself. Do you want to stay at 10% body fat year round, or are you willing to gain a little bit of weight to get stronger and bigger? And if you're not willing to gain some weight to get stronger and bigger, then be happy where you are. But you can't have it both ways. You have to pick one. You have to pick one. And what you're saying here tells me that you're hung up on fear of the scale going up because you feel fatter, but you're lean. You're lean year round. What are you talking about? So it's kind of like you're trying to feed two different goals and they're conflicting with each other. You're going to have to pick one for a little while. If you want to get bigger and stronger, you want these numbers to come up and you want to put on another 5 or 6 pounds of muscle, you're going to have to probably gain 8, 9, 10 pounds on the scale. That's just reality because you're not eating enough. You're keeping the scale weight too low. You're going to have to eat enough to gain. And you know what? That's fine. So what? If you gain 2 pounds or 3 pounds of fat, but you gain more muscle than you gain fat, as someone like you who doesn't seem to have a lot of trouble staying at a lower body weight and staying leaner, you're going to have no trouble losing 2 pounds of fat. Okay? You're going to diet that off in like 2 weeks when you go back to the same food you were on before. It's not going to take you long. Not for a guy who's with your structure, your obvious metabolism and appetite. You're going to have no trouble dieting off 2 or 3 pounds of fat if you gain a little bit of fat, gaining that 5 pounds of muscle. You need to up your carbs. You need to up your carbs. All right, next question. Hi Jason, are isometric exercises where you push, pull against an immovable object or push against the other hand, etc., any use for building muscle? In my case, it would be just used to complement my bodyweight exercises for times when I can't get to the gym. Many thanks. I'm not a fan of isometrics. I'm just going to be honest. Not saying, and here's the thing, people will say stupid stuff like, well, you've never tried them. This person recommends them. I don't care who recommends them. I have worked with isometrics in the past. I've known people who work with isometrics in the past, and they are an abysmal failure. I don't think they work at all. And I don't think doing little short 2-inch range of motion reps, which are similar to isometric with ultra heavy weight, I don't think it works. You lose strength. So for someone who isn't doing much training at all, isometrics, like you're describing, might give you a little bit of muscle, but they do not give you good strength carryover. I don't recommend investing much time or effort into them. Body weight stuff, what do you mean? Why don't you just do some body weight stuff? Get a chin-up bar. Get a chin-up bar. Get you a little perfect push-up thing for your office so you can do some push-ups. Find something you can do chin-ups on. I mean, what do you mean not get to the gym? If you're focusing on a lot of body weight exercises, body weight stuff just requires bars put in the right places. You should be able to do that every single day. It's not a problem. I wouldn't waste a lot of time worrying about isometrics though, because in my experience, they don't work. They're a waste of time, and too much focus on them, in my experience, makes you weaker when you actually need to move through the full range of motion. Just an observation. I'm not a fan. All right, next question. So if failed reps are considered wasted reps, shouldn't it not be if the muscle has to run through all the muscle fibers to even move the bar a little? Just a thought. I just got pinned on some squats. LOL, thanks. How do I put this? All right. You got pinned under a squat, right? That's a failed rep. Let's say you're doing a heavy squat and you got pinned on the 8th rep. The first rep or 2, you didn't hit the upper threshold fibers, right? Because a 7 rep max, it takes a couple reps. It takes a couple reps to start hitting the first threshold fiber. So let's say on rep 3, you reached all the available muscle fibers, because the stamina fibers started getting fatigued. The fibers that are least capable of growing were getting fatigued. And then you started working your way up to the higher threshold fibers, and they got about 4 or 5 good reps, and then they stopped firing. So you're thinking, well, I moved the bar a little bit. No, because the stamina fibers kicked back in. Meaning, on a 7 rep set or an 8 rep set, do you really think the first rep or the second rep gave you that many gains? No, they didn't. It probably that 3rd rep is where you started gaining muscle or stimulating significant muscle growth, because a weight that you can lift 7 times isn't that heavy of a weight. All right. So you're able to lift it the first couple reps without using all the higher threshold fibers. But then those stamina fibers start to get tired, too tired to lift it for 3 or 4 reps. So the higher fibers kick in. By the time you started getting towards the grinders, when the weight starts slowing down, maybe on the 7th rep, you're already losing the upper threshold fibers. All right, those maximal power fibers are cutting out. They're not working anymore because you fatigued them. They did their 3 or 4 reps. They're done. They don't have anything left. They stopped firing. That's why maybe the 7th rep was really slow, because you didn't recruit those muscle fibers. They're done. They're too fatigued to keep going. So you dropped down the fibers, so fewer fibers were being used on that 7th rep. And then the 8th rep, even fibers further up, some of your strength fibers didn't fire either. They were too exhausted to fire again, so they didn't actually work, and then you failed. That makes sense. Grinders usually mean that the upper threshold fibers are failing to recruit. They're not recruiting and then stopping, because that's not how they work. A fiber either recruits 100% or it doesn't. So if the weight is slowing down after several reps, you're losing the fastest fibers. The upper threshold fibers are not firing. Some of them are too fatigued to keep going. They're cutting out before you get to the rep. And then the one you failed, probably a lot of your other strength fibers, even those muscle fibers that are capable of good muscle growth, didn't fire at all, and that's why you got pinned. They didn't fire. Had they fired, you would have lifted the weight. Instead, it was mostly your stamina fibers trying, and they just couldn't do it. So essentially, a failed rep like that, you aren't stimulating really significant muscle growth anymore. You probably weren't. The last rep before it probably stimulated very, very little growth, if any, because the highest threshold fibers probably weren't kicking in. They weren't turning on at all. They were too tired to turn on their fatigue. They needed a break before they could fire again. And then that last one, probably all your strength fibers didn't even come into play. So you really got minimal muscle growth. But what you did do is fatigue your nervous system and fatigue your body, and it's going to be longer before you can train hard again. Okay, so that's what basically happened. So ultimately, that's why they don't really help you that much, and people need to understand that. You're down to the lowest growth threshold fibers by the time you reach muscle failure, usually. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.